is one of those services, and there's a bunch of them out there. And if you Google yourself, which you probably should do just for the edification, you'll come up with a bunch of those. And there are some ways that you can take the information offline. Almost every one of them. In fact, after Ann and I were talking about that a couple of days ago, I spent an entire day going through and researching these guys and putting myself into opt out of all of them, just to see how well that worked. Because what you can do is basically go on and Google the website's name, like findme.com, if that's the name of one. Findme.com space opt out, OPT space OUT. And if you Google that or search, whatever search engine you use, you'll find it'll come back with a bunch of lists of these, the websites you're looking for, and how the page, usually the link that you can go to if they have one, to remove your information. Most of them do, and I think it may be part of the privacy laws in the U.S. Or the Federal Trade Commission or somebody is really getting excited about that, or has been, and has done that. So that's the first thing. Go on there and do opt out. Google during the week had a way to remove you from Google search results, and I did that too. And I got a response back because I went out and looked and found one that was just absolutely wrong. It had my name and my address right, but everything else was pretty wrong about it. And so I wanted it not to appear in Google searches anymore. So I put it in for Google just to see, and I got a result saying it was approved and they're going to take it off. The problem with just removing it from Google is that there's other search engines out there. There's Edge, from Microsoft. There's Yahoo as a search engine. There's a lot of DuckDuckGo is a separate search engine. So you only remove it from Google. You don't get it from the others. But it may not hurt to do both. But go on there after you Google yourself and Google the name of the website that you find information that's inaccurate or objectionable that you don't like, and just opt out. OPT, OUT is the phrase. And they almost all have a page that you can fill in, and I haven't gone back and checked to make sure that it's gone, but it usually takes 48 to 72 hours for it to go off.
Well, Google definitely was timely in my case, 2 days, and it was out of the Google search and approved to be out of the Google search. But your point is well taken. I need to go right to the source. And then on top of that, I think that I will look at all the other not all the other, that's impossible. Some of the major search engines and see if I can do the same thing and just cover my bases. I mean, we always talk about layering our defenses, right?
Yep. Yeah, so, that's exactly right. And bring a lunch if you're going to try to go to the source on all of the actual ones, because I literally spent all day doing it, finding one, and because there's so many of them out there that I literally, and there's documents out there. There's actually companies that you can pay to monitor your online presence, but they're pretty expensive because they're aimed at other companies. But if you're that concerned about it, you can also go that way.
Or you can hire your own PR person. That's an even more expensive way to do it. That's what corporations do, monitoring their presence. So, but just kidding. But thank you very, very much, Dave. And I'm really happy to know that information. We've had, by the way, if any of you want to ask, please unmute yourself so that, because I don't necessarily see everybody at the same time here, so I may not see your mouth moving. So any questions that have come up from that question being answered?
Yeah, there's one in the chat.
Oh, yes, I see that. This is from Nancy B. on a different topic. My daughter received a call from someone at the Federal Student Loan Program offering to enroll them over the phone. And he started asking personal information, and my daughter got nervous, smart girl, and she hung up. Was this a fraud attempt?
Yes, almost certainly. The FBI sent out a notice last week or week before last specifically about this, that the student loan program, because it's still in some turmoil, but it looks like it's going to happen, at least in some form. And so the fraudsters have already jumped on it. And the scammers are basically calling people saying they're from the student loan program and they can enroll you over the phone All they need is all your personal information. And the FBI's point is don't do that because the student loan program is not going to do that. And whoever you call, or whoever calls you, no matter how convincing they sound, is a fraudster, because the student loan program, they're right now they're not really enrolling anybody yet because it hadn't been cleared by the courts and everything. I think it's all on pause. So yeah, almost certainly that was a fraud, a scam, and good on her for realizing that and saying, because that's the only way those guys get the message you don't want to talk to them.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like, they're anxious for everybody's loan to be,
No.
forgiven. So they're not going to be reaching out proactively other than making the information available so that you can make the initial contact, right?
Yeah.
Does that seem reasonable?
Yeah, and exactly. And they're probably doing the same thing that a lot of other scammers do, that will tell you, hey, they're calling you from, SunTrust Bank, say,
Oh,
and
good point.
you need to, reset your password, or sending you an email or a text saying this is SunTrust Security Department, your account's been compromised, and you go and do it without even thinking, well, I don't even have a SunTrust account. So, if you don't have anything to do with the student loan program, then you're probably not going to be helped by the student loan program guy calling you. So it's probably just a scam.
Very good to know. That's why we love having Dave. He can tell us like it is. Okay, there is another question in chat. And again, I want to encourage you guys, because this is your forum, to continue to send us questions. So Nancy, thank you for that question about student loans. And Jeffrey is asking, I'm about to start my serious Christmas shopping. What are some common scams to watch out for when I'm shopping online this season? Should I use my credit card, my debit card? Does it matter? Tell us about that, Dave, if you would, please.
Well, always use your credit card. If you're going to shop online, always use your credit card. Don't use a debit card, period. End of discussion. Because as we've said before, credit cards have that $50 loss limit that in many cases would save you from loss, as well as if you get into a situation where you try to buy something and you realize it's probably a scam, you can call the credit card company and say you want to opt or dispute the transaction. That's the technical term they use. Dispute the transaction. And what that does is that the bank will then put a kind of a freeze on the transaction. The rest of your card activity you have to pay, but it'll put a freeze on that transaction until they reach out to the merchant, to whoever you're buying it from, and saying, hey, verify this is legitimate. And they do a little investigation, which is really what you want it to do. Because if it's a scammer, they're not going to be able to contact them, and they'll assume it's a scam and give you your money back. Every Christmas, we have frauds and scams that involve lots of merchandise fraud. You go online, you get a pop-up on Facebook Marketplace, or if you're just trolling around the internet, you go to a website, something looks really cool. You send you send your credit card to order something, and either they don't send it to you ever, or they send you something that's clearly not what you ordered, and then you have a hard time getting your money back, or getting them even to address it. So make sure that when you go to a website, you don't do it out of a pop-up ad. You don't do it out of an email. If you're going to troll around looking for something for your family on the internet websites, make sure that the website looks legitimate, that it doesn't have misspellings, it doesn't have all those things we talk about that might be red flags for frauds. And then make sure, just kind of have awareness of how the transaction goes. I talked to somebody on the helpline the other day who basically realized that they had been scammed when the transaction just didn't seem to go right as other transactions online had done. And they had been scammed. They're having a hard time getting their money back now. So just kind of pay attention and know what you're looking at and know what you're looking for. Christmas is always a time for
He said, so it should be any time now. It's just got to go through the course. Now, for some reason, I muted it for a second. Now I can't get it back. Oh. You're frozen, it says. Why?
Yeah, you guys froze too. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. The perils of
computers
of Zoom. Yeah. So, can you still hear me? I can't hear you.
Okay,
there we go. So how far did I get in my little dialogue?
You were. I don't even remember because I started scrambling.
Just remember, the scammers are going to get you try to get you for charity fraud, or don't reply to any texts or emails or pop-ups online that you get from Facebook or whatever.
Pop up.
If you want to give, you see something that looks cool on Facebook, go to the company's website and use it, and just pay attention to the transaction to make sure that the transaction as it happens makes sense. Because all of us have bought something online and kind of know what to expect during the course of a transaction. And if it doesn't follow that, if it looks kind of odd, just get your spidey sense going and saying, hey, something's wrong here.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. And let's see, Bonnie on Facebook, she had a comment that Facebook and Messenger are both well known for phishing. Yes. And do we know that? So that is definitely something to continue to look for during the holiday season and virtually any other time. So thank you.
And any other social media too.
All right. Okay. I'm continuing to monitor the chat box, and I will continue to look for people who might be waving at me. And again, definitely encouraging you to add your questions here. Okay, this is kind of related to our first one when we're talking about our information potentially being out there in the wrong hands. Someone this week said they had just received the notification that some of my data, his data, was lost in a data breach at a company they had never heard of. What do I do now?
Well, unfortunately, that's not so uncommon because companies have a lot of interlacing relationships where they'll either, like mortgage brokers, for example, you may have your mortgage with one bank, and then the bank will turn around and sell your mortgage to 2 or 3 other people, and suddenly you're hearing from a company that says they have your mortgage and here's the guys you got to start paying. So that's not unheard of, and it's certainly kind of a normal way of doing business. The problem is when they lose your data, some company you've never heard of may have had your data, and the first thing you say is, who are these guys and why do they have all this data on me? If you've had a data breach, one of the first things you need to do is start asking questions. Go to that company's website, look for because they should post something on their website, about the data breach. Change all your passwords. Try to find out what they had about you, what kind of information they had, and what kind of information was lost. And usually, and I've done hundreds of data breach investigations in my career, usually over the course of an investigation, when you're doing it, at first it may look this big, and then in the end it looks this big, because you find as you follow the trail, follow the evidence, that the hacker not only had access to the names and user IDs and passwords, but he also had the addresses, and then you'll find, oh crap, they had access to the social security numbers, and so it just kind of gets bigger sometimes. So keep looking at that to make sure that you understand what's lost. There's a great website if they've lost personal information, financial information, social security number, Medicaid information, any of that stuff. Identitytheft.gov is the FTC's website for victims or people who think they've been victims or might be of identity theft. And it's got a whole bunch of really good checklist type items to do and what they call the response plan or recovery plan. And so you need to report it there and get on there and get the recovery plan, and it'll tell you steps to go through. Again, absolutely make sure you've changed all your passwords and that they're good, strong passwords, and using 2-factor authentication wherever you can.
And there's lots of questions on two-factor authentication that I think we want to get to. But we did get a question in our chat box. My computer has started acting weird. I'm afraid it's got a virus, but how do I know? What signs do I look for?
Well, a lot of times, this is what I find, that first time your computer hiccups, everybody's so freaked out about malware as they think it's a virus. And so computers are basically technology, and technology has problems every now and then. But if you really start having some of these symptoms, more than one of these symptoms, you may really think about it. If your computer is suddenly running really slow, or you notice that the hard drive that you have, the hard drive light that tells you that it's accessing the hard drive, never goes out. It suddenly starts just banging that hard drive really hard. Those are two pretty good issues. If it suddenly slows down for no other reason, then, I mean, if you didn't do an update, or you didn't, you just loaded in a program and suddenly you can't do anything with it, that's a pretty good indicator. If you're having account issues with especially more than one place, like your bank and CNN, or your bank and your financial, or your doctor, or whatever, if you start having account issues that are serious and you can't figure out why, that could be one that tells you that somebody's tampering with your account. If you're ever locked out of an account because somebody's changed the password, that's a pretty good indicator that there's a problem. If you're seeing more pop-up windows than normal, and I know people hate pop-up windows, and there are things out there that you can put in your browser that are pop-up fighters, blockers of pop-ups. So, and they work pretty well. But if you have more of those than normal, or your browser just starts acting weird, it starts going to places you've never seen it before. If you've got files or programs that you can't get to anymore, they're missing, or you just can't, they're inaccessible, or things you don't know about. You can't say you don't know what this thing is, this file is, you don't know what this program is. That's a concern too. The biggest thing people will get, though, is if somebody tries to connect to your computer remotely, you should get a notification that says, hey, user X is trying to connect, allow this or disallow it. Never, ever give anybody access to your computer unless you control it and you know who they are and you initiated that interaction, because that is a guarantee somebody's trying to get into your computer. Those are just some of the red flags. There's a lot more, and you can go online and Google, red flags or warning signs your computer is hacked, and you can get a huge list of them.
Terrific. And one thing I wonder if you could expand on, and that is the role of software updates in all of this.
Yeah, I mean, software updates, we tell people to update their software, and they're vital. Like I read this morning that Google Chrome has an emergency update because somebody found a 0-day vulnerability. So if you have Google Chrome and use it, go out there and do an update on it, because it needs to, and Google's real good about updating Chrome automatically when it's ready, but go out there and look for that update, but when you have an update, especially if it's a security related one, it's not unheard of for the update to break something. And so, nobody's perfect, right? And so sometimes these things are very complex. The programs are hugely complex with millions of lines of code. And so there's unintended consequences. So, but the risk of not doing them far outweighs the risk of having a problem. And most publicly used consumer grade applications are pretty good about not breaking themselves when you do an update.
Thankfully.
Yeah.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much. And thank you, Justin, for the question. Let's see, changing gears for just a second. With all the tension over Ukraine, Russia, China was in the news this morning, does the individual person in the US have to worry about being hacked by some of these players like North Korea, Russia, China?
Yeah, probably not usually. I mean, there's several different types of hacker groups and motivations for these guys. One is what we call cyber war, which is what Russia and Ukraine and China are doing to each other, and us are doing to everybody. You know, when you get into a shooting war, you're also going to, even if you're not in a shooting war, also going to mess around with them by having your hackers go after them. But they usually don't go after individual consumers in either country. They usually, unless you have something to do with the government or have something to do with you know, or you're an executive in a utility or a bank or something like that, the individual consumer is probably not going to worry about those things. Now, what they may have is secondary impacts. You know, if Russia hacks the U.S. Power grid, or China hacks the water supply of Seattle, you know, the pump stations and all that are all online. So if they mess with those, then you're probably going to be impacted. But really, the only, you know, Russia itself doesn't do much in the way that I'm aware of hacking to try to get money against you and me personally. North Korea, on the other hand, is one that you have to kind of be aware that they're out there and they are very aggressive, and they do go after individuals because that's how they fund their economy in a lot of ways, because the embargoes that have been in place for so many years have pretty much strangled off any kind of investment, and they're really suffering. And so one of the things that we've seen is the North Koreans are behind a lot of the financial related and crypto related, especially crypto related crimes.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, that's a bit of a relief to know, but always good to hear you say so. Now, one thing I would like to do right now, because as I have been preaching all along, but we have had a couple of people join, this becomes so much more interesting than it already is by your questions. Okay. So I'm wondering if everyone can find their chat box and just throw in a word or two about topics around fraud that you'd like to hear Dave speak on. And so we're kind of like saying it doesn't have to be a perfect question. If there's a topic that you think is important, please throw them on in the chat box, and we'll add them, because we really want to reflect your interests here.
Okay. So the first one is passwords. So passwords, as we've said, you know, we keep harping on them because the passwords are the things that get us into our accounts, and they're the easiest and most common way that a hacker gets into your applications. They don't even have to get into your computer. They can, you know, break into your bank by having your user ID, guessing your user ID and password, and getting in there, and you never know the difference until you go look at your bank account. We always talk about passwords being, you know, upper and lowercase. Use your special characters, really random, no English words, no Spanish words, nothing you can find in any dictionary. But especially an English dictionary, because there's programs out there that can guess based on English words. If your password is fluffy, there's a program out there that'll take a dictionary and encrypt all the words, and then match it against the word fluffy, and then they have your password. So random characters, random numbers, the longer the better. Using a password manager is one of the things we always talk about, because we all have too many passwords. And we don't want you to reuse passwords from one application to another. So don't use the same password you use for AARP.org that you use for your bank account, or don't use the same bank account information that you use for CNN, because if a hacker gets a legitimate password that they know that works, the first thing they do is go try to use what they call basically a program that spams out 1,000 different accounts at different companies with whatever your user ID would look like, and that password, because they know people are lazy and they reuse your passwords.
Terrific. Thank you. And Sandy is asking us about the Remember Me box when you log into an app.
Yeah, the Remember Me box is kind of a controversial thing in security in some ways, because a lot of people say don't ever do anything like that, because it puts some of the information out there on your computer. And, you know, if a hacker gets in or tries to get access to your computer and is successful, then they're halfway there if they don't have to guess your user ID. The Remember Me box is that checkbox that when you sign in, you don't have to sign in again, or you don't have to at least put your name in the box. You may have to type your password. They work a little different, all of them. How they do that is they put a little cookie, a little file on your computer once you click the Remember Me box. They would the little cookie contains your password, and it will basically, or it'll contain probably just your user ID. Very few of them nowadays do user ID and password. The Remember Me box, but again, that's halfway. If I'm a hacker, that's halfway. If I can get that information, I'm halfway there. The other thing is that you don't really know. I mean, one of the problems is with encryption. Encryption's a great thing if it's done correctly, but you don't know the other end how well they're doing it, right? You don't know how well it's installed or maintained or used. And so same thing with the Remember Me box. That's part of the implementation at the company's end of a website and a web server. And if they don't implement it correctly, it's conceivable that it could be hacked and they could get access to it. So you just got to be careful. I mean, I confess I use it on some of my websites just because I'm in them every day and I don't want to have to sign in every day. But that's kind of a weighing the risk, because so much security is personally, it's weighing the risks versus the rewards, or the good things versus the potential bad things.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. Just quickly, Lena asked a question about handouts. There is some standard handouts that will be sent if you are registered to you at 5 p.m. tonight. Also, keep in mind that unlike many of our Speakers Bureau presentations, which are scripted, and have specific information tied to them. This is on the larger subject of fraud, and two, we never know where we're going when we are on here on a Friday. And that's what we love about this particular forum, is because you guide it. So that said, we have a couple of comments here. Dave, I'd like you to take a shot at. I keep my passwords, by the way, this is from Dan. Dan, thank you so much for that. I keep my passwords on a password protected Excel file on a thumb drive. I only plug in the thumb drive when I need to. I don't let any computer programs keep my password. Okay, what are your thoughts on that?
That you know of. You don't let them keep your password that you know of. That's better than just keeping it, using the same password over and over again, Dan. But that's still probably not exactly the safest thing, because once you plug that into your computer, the thumb drive into your computer, there may be all kinds of things going on inside it that you are unaware of. If you're on a website, trying to sign into a website, there's a lot of things that a website can do without your knowledge, and you'll never know. So you don't let the computer keep your password if you know it's going to ask you, but you don't know what it's doing behind the scenes. So I would still advocate, as opposed to that, use a password manager, encrypt your passwords on. A password manager usually installs it on your hard drive of your system, or on the in the cloud. That's a much safer way, I think, doing it than what you're doing it that way. Even though it seems to be, there's a lot of pitfalls there, and I think it's pretty risky to do it that way.
Okay. Great. Thank you so much. And we have a follow-up to Sandy's question about the Remember Me box. Lena asks, how do you remove Remember Me?
Well, first of all, you can't really remove Remember Me. You can't make the website not show you the box. You can uncheck Remember Me, and then you can go through and use a cleanup program for your hard drive that'll clean out cookies. There's several different types of them out there. You got to be kind of careful, because that's a hotbed of malware. But there's some pretty well known programs that help you clean up your hard drive, make your computer more efficient, whatever. And you can just remove cookies, and it'll remove some cookies you may want. You may have to go back into your favorite websites and give yourself, some time to go through and tell it what you want it to do if you've got it customized or anything. But in the end of the day, removing cookies takes it out of your computer, and unclicking Remember Me may do the same thing. I don't know if they actually, when you unclick it, once you've had it, if you take it off, does it remove it automatically? I don't think it probably does. So you probably have to go in and remove your cookies.
Okay. Now, is that the same as going into my settings and unchecking cookies or something that sounds a little bit different?
Yeah, you can do that, but the problem is, no, that's a good thing. Unchecking cookies does not allow them to put cookies on your hard drive. But that's only going forward from the time you unclick it. It doesn't do anything to the cookies you've already got there.
Ah, okay.
So some browsers and some utility programs may, disk maintenance programs or whatever that pop up. Like I've got one that pops up and says you can get 2 gigabytes by removing junk files. And if I say do it, it removes cookies and a whole bunch of other temporary files and gives me more disk space back. That kind of thing usually can be adjusted to take out cookies too.
Great. Thank you so much. And we are sparking quite several conversations here on chat, and we are absolutely thrilled with that. Keep them coming. And Sandy asked you to talk a little bit about when websites ask if we will allow them to know our location.
Yeah, that's kind of a touchy subject now, because a lot of places want to know your location, and some need to. I mean, your GPS program is not going to work real well if you don't let it know your location. Some of the other programs you use, like I'm using one on a website, and it's now, and it asks for my location, which is okay because it's trying to find companies that I'm looking for in a geographic area of my location, and I automatically can, it automatically know. So I'll let it do that. But if you're on a application that you really don't think you understand why they want to know your location, then don't do it. And you can go into your mobile phones are terrible like that, Apple as well as Androids. You can go in and actually tell, at least on an Apple, one application by application, if they can use your location, if they can, have access to your files, et cetera, you can customize it that way. And I urge you to go in through the settings program and do that on both your Apple and your Android phones.
And speaking of location, Dee Dee asks, should settings to display location on mobile computer devices, I assume cell phones, tablets, that type of thing, be turned off?
Again, I would go in and do yourself kind of a pro and con risk analysis, application by application, and look and see which ones don't make sense on your particular mobile device as to why this application wants your location. If it doesn't have one, like I have one on my phone that is because I'm CPR trained, it'll go off if somebody needs CPR and I'm in Walmart or whatever. And because it knows my location. So I let it know my location, because if that's the whole purpose behind having it. But, I don't necessarily need my notes, Apple Notes thing, iOS Notes, knowing where my where my location is. So I'll turn it off. So there's really not a blanket answer. Go in and decide which ones fit your lifestyle to have this application knowing your location, and which one doesn't. And that goes for anything they ask for. Does it make sense? And do you want it that way? And if you don't, turn it off.
Excellent. Thank you. I'm loving these questions. Okay. And we have a question from Janet. How safe is a password manager from being hacked? Because we always encourage people to use a password manager.
Again, if you follow the rules that we've given you and have a really strong master password, every one of the program managers need to have a master password that gets you into the program manager, the password manager. And if you have to have the strongest password you can possibly imagine needs to be that password manager's master password, because that gets you in. And if I'm a hacker and if your password is fluffy and I break that, I got access to all your passwords then. So there haven't been too many. There's only been 1 or 2 instances where password manager companies have been hacked. And the last one I'm aware of that was really publicized was several years ago. So it's pretty safe, and it's very safe because it encrypts everything. And I mean, this is these guys' business, so they're going to do a really good job. And if they find something wrong, they're going to jump on it and fix it pretty quick. So they're much safer than sadly, I'm doing it on a spreadsheet or doing it on a Microsoft Word document in your computer and thinking you can. Because I'll tell you, Excel spreadsheets, the first semi-hacking thing I ever did was as an investigator for the Air Force, was to figure out a way to break the encryption or find the password really of Excel. And that was way back in the 1990s. But the Excel spreadsheet, when they said they encrypted it, what they did, they encrypted the password and stuck it in the file. So if I knew the location, I could decrypt it, and that's what I did. So I'm sure they've increased their capabilities. But the point is that encrypting, thinking you're encrypting it in a Word document or Excel spreadsheet is much riskier than using a password manager.
And there was a thought that kind of flitted across my brain as we were talking about the Remember Me box. I mean, a password manager acts automatically when you get to a software, right? And it takes care of all those things that you think. For me, Remember Me is, okay, I don't have to at least type in my username. Okay, I don't want to do the password part, but I'm too lazy to put in my username. Well, I guess if we go to a software with the use of a password manager, it just puts everything in, doesn't it?
Yeah. I mean, that's
for those of us who like to minimize our keystrokes.
That's the beauty of a password manager. Now, I have to say, full disclosure, some websites don't let you do that. Some applications don't let you do that. But so I don't want anybody going away saying, well, he told me it would always work, but it doesn't, because it doesn't always work, at least in my experience. But more times than not, it works great, and it's easy to deal with. And you can get yourself crossways in it, just like any other thing dealing with passwords. If you reset it and forget to tell it to save the password, then you're kind of messed up. But it's much safer. That's the safest way we know of right now to deal with your passwords.
Great. All right. And the last question I see right now in chat came from Dee Dee. And I love the fact that we have people on here from all walks of life. And this gentleman has a background in insurance fraud. And he said, oops, sorry, wrong person. Sorry, the person, Don, was asking me, I'd like information sent to my email on file about how to help with fraud counseling and advice. Probably a good time to talk about our helpline.
Yep. Write this number down, Don. 877-908-3360. That's our AARP Fraud Watch call center helpline for people. It's run by volunteers. It's managed by AARP, and they provide all the capabilities, but all the people that talk on it are volunteers. And we help everybody. You don't have to be an AARP member. You don't have to have anything to do with us. You don't have to be over 50 or whatever the age is now, because we help people on every walk of life. We have a translation line, so you can, there's like 40 languages. So if they're not, if they don't speak English very well or are not native English speakers and want to speak another language, that's cool too. And basically that's what we're there for. We're there to help people, give them advice. We can't act as case managers. We can't basically over the long term make calls for them and write letters for them and act as a lawyer or anything like that. But it certainly gives them a lot of people. First of all, it kind of calms them down if they're kind of freaked out about it, because a lot of people are when they're victims of fraud or a scam. And secondly, it kind of gives them a way forward. It tells you what you need to do and things like that. The number is 877. Well, here, I'll just put it in the chat. How about that?
There you go. Thank you so much.
Go ahead.
No. And again, we want to thank Don for that question as you're putting that in chat. And also, I will move on to a question from Dee Dee, who also looks like he has some expertise in this area. He said, this is kind of off topic, but many companies require SMS MFA code. Yep. The site only allows for one mobile phone. And is there an effective means to convince these companies to allow more than one mobile phone, such as if you have someone else has a power of attorney or they have a personal rep, which means two different cell phones may be trying to access an account?
Not reliably way to convince companies to do that. Some companies do that automatically. They'll ask you for more a primary and an alternate for that kind of thing. One of the things about using the telephone, using your mobile phone to send, you sign up on your account, you tell them your phone number, and when you sign in again, they send you a code to your phone through text. That's what SMS means, is short message system, which is text. And the MFA is multi-factor authentication. So that's the thing that happens when you sign in, then you give them your phone number and they send you a 4-digit code and you have to type it in. The problem with that, there's other better ways to handle that now. If it is to use if the website or application supports it, use some other way of doing it, because using the cell phone, using the mobile device has been broken. There's ways to get around that. There's one called SIM swapping, where the hacker will actually, with a cohort with a phone company, with Verizon or T-Mobile or whoever you use, will convince them that they are you, and you've lost your SIM card, you've lost your phone, and I need another SIM card for this new phone I got. And if they can convince them to give you or give them a SIM card that actually operates your number, then they get the text message. And that's kind of an esoteric way to get into it, but it's actually been used quite often. If back to your direct question, I don't think there's any real effective means to convince them except nagging at them. If you have a power of attorney or a personal representative, or doing putting that in there, put your number, if you're the power of attorney or the personal rep, put your number in there instead of the person's. My wife is personal representative for one of her relatives who has serious health problems, and she handles all that stuff. And so all her numbers are in there as the personal representative, and for multi-factor, she gets all of that because her relative can't handle that. So I don't know of a better way. I'm sorry.
That was a great question, and also thank you for the great answer. We had a Zoom user who had their hand up earlier, and I just hadn't quite gotten there. That same person did ask to repeat the helpline number, and just in case you're not in chat, that number again for anyone is 877-908-3360. And again, it's about 2 messages from the end in the chat box right now. But Zoom user, if you had another question you'd like to ask, if you want to unmute yourself and ask that question, please feel free to do so. All right. Feel free to sing out if there's another question there. Let's see. Someone is asking, is an on-screen visual keyboard and mouse pointer better than a physical keyboard for inputting sensitive data?
No, not really. I mean, it's really kind of a personal preference thing, right? A keyboard's a keyboard, whether you're using your mouse or using the actual keyboard. I personally find on-screen keyboards extremely aggravating, and so I don't use them. But it's not from any real security concern. It's just because they make me mad when I do it. So I don't think I've never heard of any real vulnerabilities in the on-screen keyboard world. I think if they wanted to attack your physical keyboard as opposed to the on-screen keyboard, they probably have to have physical access to your computer to put some sort of chip or something in the computer itself. So there are ways to, real esoteric ways used by the intelligence world to do keystrokes and, count the clicks and listen to them and do all that crazy stuff and figure out what you're keying in. But your average run-of-the-mill scammer that most people are going to run into is not going to be that sophisticated.
Fabulous. Thank you. And two things to wind up with. Can you give us your guidance to find a safe password manager?
Well, yeah, there's a couple of things you can do, a couple of places you can go online. Don't just get on and Google password managers, because if you do, the first 5 of them will be a set of ads placed by somebody, whether they're legitimate or not, to try to get you to click on their product and either buy their product or load down something that has malware in it. We found a lot of that happen. So be real careful about taking the first, because they know people are lazy. They're going to Google something or search for something on the search engine and take the first thing that pops up. And unfortunately, the first thing that pop up with every search engine I'm aware of has what's called search engine optimization, and which basically means they can pay the company or pay a company and they will tweak the search engine so that their ad appears at the top. So don't just Google password manager or antivirus or any of those things. And if you do, look for the things, that are labeled ad. There are a few places to go to that I trust. One is PC Magazine. Their website, pcmag.com, annually does a whole bunch of different testing of products and applications. And they post that. And they'll every year tell you the top 10 password managers, the top 10 antivirus, the top 10 VPNs, and the free ones as well as the ones you pay for. And you can go on there and look at the different categories and pick one that looks like it serves your interests best or fits your life best. So that's always a good one. There's other ones that are out there. Almost any computer magazine or computer store will probably have access to some sort of product comparisons. Consumer Reports always does that. If you're a member of Consumer Reports, just be careful when you just kind of go on and look for one, though, because a lot of them are published and run by the companies that are trying to sell you something. So, they'll always be saying ours is the best because this, and this, and denigrating the other one. So try to make sure you have somebody that is fair and unbiased and is doing a good job of testing.
Okay, great. Terrific. We do have a couple more. And do you mind, Dave, if we keep going on these?
Keep going.
All right.
I love it.
Good. We have a thought from Michael Thompson. He's asking, so when we're on the road in our RV and we have our computers, our iPhones, and we are accessing our banking, and because they have to, they're on the road.
Yep, absolutely.
What's the safest thing to do? We've used our carrier's hotspot and we never use public Wi-Fi.
We're good.
Anything else to consider?
Well, yeah, you should probably, as a matter of, another layer of protection, use a VPN. There's free VPNs, again, like the previous question, several places to search for free VPNs. There's quite a few companies out there that have them. And basically they will run, the one I use runs on my phone, it runs on my computer, and I use it even though if I'm using a hotspot somewhere, I'll still use a VPN, because that way it's an encrypted. An AT&T hotspot or anybody's hotspot is going to make it harder for the average person in the next room to get into your computer, because they have to have if it's on the telephone network as opposed to the Wi-Fi network in a hotel, it's a lot harder to get to if it's using the cellular network. You have to have special equipment and stuff. But it never hurts to have a VPN. So I would, first of all, absolutely do a VPN in that situation. Also, contact your bank and tell them you're on the road. Tell them you want to put a flag on your account that if anything untoward happens on there, anything unusual, that you're notified. That's always a good thing. Your credit cards, we always tell people on your credit cards that have a capability to alert you when the credit card is used, if there's a certain dollar amount used, go on there and use that and put that dollar amount down to like 5 cents. So you use, if all your credit cards, if anybody's got your credit card information, they are able to and charge something to your credit card. You'll get notified at least, because you probably aren't going to be able to do a whole lot about it except dispute the charge. But at least you'll know that something's going on.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Bonnie on Facebook has asked us about the seniors using freezing our credit and getting our credit reports and why that's important. Could you do a quick synopsis on that topic?
Sure. Freezing your credit is very important, especially if you have any concerns about identity theft, because freezing your credit is one of the free steps you can take with all three of the credit bureaus to put kind of a lock on your credit history, so that going forward somebody can't impersonate you and get a new credit card in your name, or get a home loan or any kind of any kind of loan, because when they do a credit check, your account is locked. Now, when you want to get a new credit card or buy a boat or buy a car, you have to call the credit, find out from the lender what credit bureau they use, unlock your file using the PIN number they give you when you lock it, to allow the credit to be checked by the merchant, and then it'll lock back automatically. That basically doesn't hurt your credit cards or accounts that you have right now. It's basically from this day forward, whenever you freeze it forward, you have to go to every one of the credit bureaus and ask for a credit freeze, because they don't like credit freezes. They'll tell you to put an alert, and you can put a security alert on there too. If you tell one credit bureau you need a security alert, they tell the other two. They don't do that for freezes. You have to call each one of the credit bureaus separately and tell them you want to freeze, and whether you do a security alert or not is your deal. It only lasts a year. A security alert does. A freeze stays on there until you take it off. A security alert on your credit record only lasts for a year, and then it falls off unless you renew it. So a freeze is that checking your credit once a year. There's a website that the credit bureaus have set up because they're forced to by the government, called annualcreditreport, all one word, .com. Annualcreditreport.com is basically a free place where once a year anybody who has credit can look at for free what the credit bureaus have in your record, what the information they have on you. That means all your loans in the past, as long as I looked at mine the other day because I look at mine regularly. And, it has going back to when I was in the Air Force 40 or 50 years ago. So 40 years ago. So, it stays on there a long time, but it has loan activity. And what you want to do is go on there and look to see if the information that it has on you is accurate. Not only is it, if you never had a late fee on a credit card, or you never paid a payment late and it shows you did, then that's an inaccuracy that you can get corrected. If it shows you that have other credit a credit card, you've got a clue what that is, you've never seen it before, then you can go on and get it corrected and claim that it was credit card fraud, whatever was on there. So there's big advantages to annualcreditreport.com. It technically is only once a year because of COVID until the end of December, I think it is. Right now, between now and the end of December, you can do it once a week if you want to. Annualcreditreport.com. You sign on to it. You answer some questions for each one of the credit bureaus of, who you are, your social security number, and all that stuff. And they're trying to make sure it's really you. And then you can get once a week, get a look at what your credit records have for all three of the credit bureaus.
Okay, great. And we have a follow-up question from Dee Dee. I cannot pass the annual credit report questions, but can access credit report logging onto the CRA site. Are the two reports good?
I'm not certain what the CRA site is. And so you can't get past annualcreditreport.com's questions. You can go to the actual websites of each of the three players. The credit bureaus. Yeah. If you can access the credit report logging onto the the TransUnion or Equifax or Experian website, go for it. This is just annualcreditreport.com is just something they put up to make it easy for people to keep from having to go to each one of the credit bureaus. But if you can do it, it's exactly the same information as far as I can tell.
Okay. And Dee Dee had a quick follow-up when we were talking about cellular data versus Wi-Fi, which you explained that Wi-Fi is more secure, correct? Yep. Do you suggest, even for the mobile phone, that you use the VPN and or an antivirus app?
Absolutely, an antivirus app. I use a VPN on my mobile phone. I didn't for a long time because VPN technology and mobile phones weren't all that compatible and they were really slow. But recently I still use it, and I have it on the one I use where it will automatically come on when I turn the computer on or turn my phone on. It just runs. It does take your battery down some on a mobile device. But if you are, the reason I say it's safer using cellular data in a way than Wi-Fi is that cellular signals are structured entirely different than Wi-Fi. And you have to have special equipment and have to have some pretty technical knowledge as a hacker to be able to tap into the cellular network. The Wi-Fi is not that way. There's things on the internet that you can get down and tap into a Wi-Fi signal pretty quickly from close by Wi-Fi's and piggyback on those and see what transactions and stuff's going on there. It's a little technical, but it's not all that hard to do. So the VPN secures both of them. And again, we call it the belt and suspenders thing when I was in the military, right? You have a belt and you have a pair of suspenders on so your pants don't fall down. Well, it's the same thing. You're just trying to layer effective ways of security. So if one fails, you've still got another one there. That's the whole idea behind layering. Excellent.
We have had an amazing set of questions here today, and love you guys is your input, your questions, your suggestions. It's really made this session very, very robust, and we appreciate that everyone has stayed with us all this way. We do want to make one thought at the end here. November is coming up, and you know that we celebrate Veterans Day in November. And there's a fraud side to this. So often our veterans are preyed upon by fraudsters, and even those people who simply want to help the veterans can get taken advantage of as well. So are there any thoughts or comments you want to make about that topic here, Dave, before we close up?
Yeah, please come back next month because we'll talk specifically about veteran fraud. But if you want to give money to any veterans organization, make sure you do some due diligence. Check the Secretary of State's website to make sure that they're registered in the state of Washington. Check there's several websites that'll tell you how, based on their financial filings, how much of the dollar you give goes to the charity's function and how much goes to overhead, because some of them will be 90% of it goes to overhead, and salaries and stuff, rather than, if only 10 cents go to the veteran organization, then I don't particularly want to go give to it. Make sure that you know who you're giving to, make sure you do due diligence and don't respond just to a text message or whatever, because there's a lot of fraud out there having to do with veterans organizations. If you are a veteran, all that applies, as well as there's certain things you don't have to pay for from the Veterans Administration. VA record keeping, getting your copy of your DD-214. If you were in the military, you know what that is. All of that is free, and you don't have to have anybody paid to do that. And there's people out there who will tell you, we can get your DD-214 in 2 days if you pay us $50. Well, you can get it in 3 by just getting on the website for the archives or the Personnel Records Center and ordering it. So unless you have to have it tomorrow, don't worry about paying those guys to do that. So just be careful and think about it.
All righty. And just a quick answer to Janet on Facebook, who's received a mailing saying that my name, address, and social security number has possibly been compromised. Guess what? That's a fraud, right, Dave?
That's a fraud. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right.
Because if you answer back, the next thing they'll do is say, well, we need to know your social security number and your bank number just to verify this is you. And once you give it you're done.
All right. Again, we want to thank everyone. We urge you to do two things next month on the second Friday of the month, Fraud Watch Friday. Dave, that was probably what you were talking about, is talking about veterans fraud and other veteran-related topics on the second Friday of the month at 10:30 a.m., followed the very next week by us on the, I think we're the 18th of the month, if I remember correctly. And yeah, the 18th of November, we will be back.
I just show up when you tell me, you know.
Well, put the 18th on your calendar, Dave, and all the rest of you. You were great today. You helped make this so much more robust. And we hope you will join us again on the third Friday of the month for these Q&As and give us your topics. And thank you for everything you gave us today. Have a wonderful weekend, and we will see you soon. Take care now.
Bye-bye.